Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm finally back. I plan to post regularly. I had some personal affairs that I had to deal with. That's the reason why I haven't been on YouTube in a long time. I may do a separate video just talking about that. But for now, I want to deal with this topic of Dave Chappelle. There has been a lot of controversy around his recent stand up act on Netflix. The name of that act is The Closer. It's again on Netflix, and I encourage people to check it out for themselves and to judge it for themselves. You have many people in the LGBT community attacking Dave Chappelle. People are calling for Netflix to remove his program from the channel. So I wanted to take some time to talk about this particular stand-up act and tell you all what I thought about it. I just watched it, right after work. I decided to go ahead and watch it for myself after hearing this controversy. I'm not one to just judge something based on what other people are saying about it or what some articles are saying about it. I have to check out things for myself. So I went on Netflix and I watched the program, and we are all familiar with one of the main quotes that came from this stand-up act, and that deals with a rapper by the name of DaBaby. We know that that rapper had come under fire for some anti-gay remarks that he made during one of his concerts. Since he made those remarks, he has been removed from various tours. He lost some sponsorship, and he has been condemned by other members of the Hollywood community and everything. He's basically been ostracized. And basically, Dave Chappelle pointed out how DaBaby actually killed somebody. And he said nothing bad happened to DaBaby's career after he killed somebody. But when he made these, quote unquote anti-gay statements and all that kind of stuff, his career was in jeopardy. And Dave Chappelle went on to say that you can shoot a nigga and kill a nigga, but you better not say something that hurts a gay person's feelings. And because of those remarks, he's come under fire. And I just want to share my thoughts about, those particular comments. First of all, the fact that that kind of thing can happen says a lot about not just about society as a whole, but it says something about the Black community as well. The fact that, for instance, things that we hear people complain about continue to be a problem in Hollywood because we don't say anything about it. We don't do anything about it. In fact, all we do is celebrate a lot of negativity. Often we're the ones celebrating these negative stereotypes that we see. We're the ones celebrating, drug dealers and killers and stuff like that. You know, we're the ones that celebrate so-called street credibility and all that kind of stuff. So that's part of the reason why somebody like DaBaby can kill somebody, but that not affect his career. So that's part of it, in terms of how the Black community deals with some of these issues. How a lot of times somebody that's like that, somebody that has history of selling drugs or even getting shot or getting killed, or killing somebody, those people are labeled as quote unquote real niggas and stuff. Those people are celebrated. People are celebrated for selling drugs. People are celebrated for shooting people or even getting shot. People look at it as some kind of badge of honor, some kind of rites of passage for someone to go to jail, for someone to do time and all that kind of stuff. So that's part of the reason why, someone like DaBaby wasn't condemned for shooting and killing somebody. In fact, I'm sure some people thought that that made him more real, that made him more authentic, that gave him street credibility. And part of that, aside from this celebration of a lot of these negative stereotypes of Black people, we also have a Hollywood industry that perpetuates these negative images of Black people, that celebrates these negative images of Black people to such a degree that people think that this is how Black people behave. People begin to equate criminality with Blackness. Blackness becomes a badge of criminality. So that's part of the reason why it's acceptable for somebody like the baby to kill somebody as opposed to him saying some negative things about the LGBT community. And part of that acceptance is on us. We tolerate stuff like that. We celebrate stuff like that. Um, and then, we want to get mad about how things are different, how people are treated differently. And even just watching, Dave Chappelle's stand-up routine made me think about the hypocrisy as well. Like he said a lot of controversial things during that stand-up routine on the closer and stuff like that. But the main thing that's being highlighted are these statements about the LGBT community. And again, it's partly Hollywood's fault and it's partly our own fault. When you look at the negative things that he had to say about Black women, for instance, during his stand-up show. Nobody's attacking him about that. Nobody's raising hell about that. His stereotyping the Black woman as being argumentative, as being not uncooperative. Those are some of the stereotypes that he presented in his routine. His constant reference to women as bitches and all that kind of stuff. Nobody's raising hell about that. Nobody's making that a subject of discussion. And, that is on Black people's shoulders. If we don't advocate for ourselves and for things that matter to us, if we're not the ones pushing for a positive image of Black people, we can't expect nobody else to. We can't expect somebody to be a better advocate for us than ourselves. If we're not the ones demanding, that these negative images, negative stereotyping of Black people in, we can't expect these other people to be some advocates for us, advocates for a positive example or positive images of Black people when we're the ones that celebrate a lot of this negativity. We're the ones that buy the music, calling our women bitches and hoes and talking about bitches ain't shit and all that kind of stuff. We're the ones that support that kind of stuff. We're not complaining about any of these negative stereotypes of Black women that, for instance, that a Dave Chappelle would put out in his routine. And you can't forget that he is, in fact, married to an Asian woman, as he makes these disparaging remarks about Black women. But nobody is challenging that. Nobody is condemning that. And that's not the LGBT community's fault. That's something that we have to look at and take accountability for. Throughout his routine, he must have said nigga 100 times. And I know that we use the N-word in a different way, in a different context and all that kind of stuff. But this man is standing before a white audience, entertaining white people by calling his own people the N-word. But nobody's, has anything to say about that. Like nobody has anything to say about, the regular usage of the N-word in our community. But yet they want to, get mad because these other people demand respect for their communities, that these other people push their issues. Instead of condemning these other people for holding people accountable or for, pushing their agenda, we need to be pushing our agenda. We need to be about promoting positive images of our people, instead of like basically getting upset at another community for holding people accountable. So, that's one thing that I have to say about this whole thing. Another thing is this, Dave Chappelle mentioned like about how he doesn't hate gay people and all that kind of stuff. And he basically was talking about how the Black community is jealous of the LGBT community because of a lot of the fast progress that they have made. And he went on to talk about um, how the civil rights movement may have made a lot of fast progress, that they made it into like combined their movement with the gay movement and introduced a lot of these gay themes and all that kind of stuff. And he was just joking around. But I understand his point. He's basically talking about how the LGBT movement has made a lot of advancements in a short period of time. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, a lot of it deals with organization. That's one aspect of it. A lot of these other communities, for instance, like the LGBT community, they pool their resources. They use their money to support candidates, to support their agenda, and they use their resources to punish those that don't support their agenda. As the Black community should be doing when it comes to the Black agenda. So that's part of the reason why they are able to see a lot of progress in a short period of time compared to the Black community. Another thing is this. Um, LGBT issues don't threaten the establishment. They don't threaten the power structure at all. They don't threaten the nature of this capitalist system. They don't threaten wealth inequality or any of these fundamental structural things. So those changes around these reforms dealing with LGBT communities and all that kind of stuff, those things don't cost the system anything at all to make concessions to. In fact, a lot of people have realized that they can profit from, the LGBT community and stuff like that. A lot of these corporations figured that they could make money from the LGBT community by embracing, at least superficially, a lot of their agenda. So the bottom line is this: they have been able to make progress in a shorter period of time, because number one, these agenda items that they're talking about don't threaten the fundamental economic system. They don't threaten, the structural inequality that exists in society. That's a social movement that deals with social issues and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't threaten capitalism. It doesn't threaten the order of things. So they're more likely to make all these concessions to that movement. So that's one thing. The other thing is the organization and the resources. Um, Too often we have infighting among Black organizations. you know uh you have people constantly attacking each other instead of building with each other. So that's part of the reason why we've seen a difference in the progress. And then also when you look at it from a historical perspective, when you look at the whole movement in terms of the time frame and all that kind of stuff, these things that they're doing haven't been something that's happened overnight. I mean, that LGBT community has been fighting for certain rights for a very long time as well. It's not like overnight everything fundamentally changed. Um, so that's one thing that I wanted to talk about. And Dave Chappelle made some interesting points. He talked about how the LGBT community, constantly complained about him punching down the LGBT community and the transgender community and all that kind of stuff. But Dave Chappelle flipped it to point out how the LGBT community is the one punching down Black entertainers like a Kevin Hart. Like Kevin Hart had this, he cited the example of Kevin Hart, for instance, uh, hosting the Oscars. I think it was the Oscars. And because of some comments that he had made before, dealing with the LGBT community and stuff like that, he lost that opportunity. But Dave Chappelle went on to say, like, even though that happened, you know, uh, Kevin Hart is a resilient type of strong person, and he still was able to thrive. His career still went ahead despite that. But that was a stumbling block for him. And then when we look at the situation with DaBaby, and even with Dave Chappelle's situation, he's under fire now and stuff like that. Um, so, I think that there's some validity to that. Some validity to the fact that, these Black entertainers have been targeted for statements that they've made. But I don't hold that against the LGBT community because they're doing what we should be doing. If somebody were to attack the Black community, if they were to make racist comments and stuff like that, we would be within our rights to use all of our resources to make sure that they were held accountable for those statements, to make sure that they, had consequences for their actions. And that's how we should operate. instead of simply just attacking that LGBT community for the way they operate in terms of responding to those that make disparaging remarks against them, and that we need to be thinking about how can we hold you know people accountable for the things that they say and do. And even more importantly than holding some people, entertainers, accountable for some statements that they make, we need to be about holding these elected officials accountable for the policies that they try to implement. Policies such as, voter suppression, policies such as trying to get rid of affirmative actions, policies such as how do we deal with this problem of police brutality. Those are the things that we need to be organizing around. And communities are organizing around those issues, but we need to be more efficient in our organization, and more go harder in the paint around these issues that matter to us, instead of tolerating stuff. It's so bad that you have black people that are apologists for these races. Some of these stepping fetching people here on YouTube make excuses for races that call black people the N word, or disparage the black community and stuff like that. You have these Aunt Jemimas like Candace Owens making excuses for that kind of stuff. Um, so the bottom line is this, man: we just need to be more efficient in defending, our community, and promoting our interests over all other interests. That's what we have to do, instead of simply attacking these other people for doing what we should be doing when it comes to our community. Now, another thing that I wanted to point out, and I will look through your comments in a second. The other thing that I wanted to deal with is this whole issue of feminism and racism and stuff like that. And he made some valid points in his stand-up act about that. He talked about like how some of these feminists are racist. Some of the feminists, he talked about the early feminist movement and how they basically tried to shut out people like Sojourner Truth and all that kind of stuff, and just the some of the racism that exists in that movement, even though they're saying they're fighting for equality and all that kind of stuff. But when white, their primary interest is the concerns and issues dealing with white women as opposed to black women and black people in general. And I just think that there's some valid points around that issue. And too often what has happened is they end up using black people to advance their own agenda, and black women's issues get pushed to the back burner, and black people in particular, our issues get pushed to the aside in the promotion of these white women's type of issues, their issues and stuff. And I think that that's a valid criticism of that movement. And one thing that I find interesting is like a lot of times they're selective in their enforcement of what they're supposed to be about. If you're against the abuse of women, it should be universal. You should go as hard against white men as you go against black men. And let me be perfectly clear, like I'm not one of these people that defend, people that attack women. I'm not one of these people that are on here turning Bill Cosby into a martyr, or turning R. Kelly into some kind of martyr and stuff like that, simply because there's unfairness in the criminal justice system. I think that, they should be held accountable too. Any man that abuses a woman should be held accountable and stuff like that. But too often what we see is, just like we see in all aspects of society, laws are more harshly imposed against black men and black people in general than they are to the larger society. Like if we even look at the war on drugs. Um, so yeah, those are some of my thoughts. And the last thing I wanted to address before I get to your comments is, Dave Chappelle's comments about gender. He talked about, the whole issue of transgenders and stuff like that, and whether or not gender is a real thing. And he made some very compelling type of arguments. Like, I mean, there really shouldn't even be arguments. They should just be matter of fact, just obvious facts. Gender is a reality. People are born men or, and women, and gender serves a purpose. That's how the human species is perpetuated and stuff. Dave Chappelle made some jokes that were kind of funny, but there was a point to it. He was just talking about how you know, uh, a transgender, for instance, he went into this whole thing about a transgender woman's vagina, and he compared it to, like, veganism versus people who eat meat. For instance, like, you have Beyond Meat, which is, a plant-based product that's not actual meat. And you have like Impossible Burger, for instance, that's served at Burger King, which is, a vegan burger that tastes similar to meat, but it's not meat. And basically he's saying, well, that may, have certain characteristics that's similar to an actual vagina, but it's not a real vagina. And then he basically was talking about how the fact of the matter is all human beings are born through a woman's womb. And these are just obvious things, but because of this nutty society that we live in, this society that is overly, quote unquote, politically correct. You know, we're being taught that gender is not even real, like that anybody can be of any gender that they imagine themselves to be, which is just absurd. It's contrary to common sense. It's contrary to logic. It's contrary to nature. It's unnatural. It's an abomination. That's just the reality of the situation. But when somebody speaks like this, they're condemned. They're attacked. Even though not too long ago, these types of things were looked upon as some kind of mental illness or some kind of problem. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's just a shame that somebody gets attacked for just expressing just common sense views. It's like they want us to be brainwashed to accept nonsense as sense. They want us to be brainwashed to the point that we accept that which is illogical and make it into logic. That's the world in which we live. And just listening to Dave Chappelle and listening to what he had to say, I don't think that he hates gay people or transgender people or anything like that. He doesn't hate them, and just listening to his stand-up routine, you can tell he's not somebody that just hates people and stuff like that. He just has a different worldview when it comes to transgenders and stuff like that. And people, that should be acceptable. He's not bashing anybody or attacking anybody because of their sexual identity. He's just expressing his opinions about the way that they live. So, or the choices that they make and stuff like that. So I'm really interested in hearing what you all have to say. I'm going to go through your comments real quick. I want to thank you all for tuning in. And, again, I will be back on here regularly. There were just some personal things that I had to take care of. I had been focusing on an art exhibit that I was working on, and it actually is continuing through November. So I had a lot of pieces that I had to put together. So that consumed a lot of my time and some other issues that I've been dealing with and stuff like that. But the art exhibit and reception was a success. Hopefully I may post some things on here. But if you follow me on Instagram, if you follow my art page, the Osaka Gallery, on Instagram, you'll be able to see a lot of the photos from that exhibit. And I plan to have, I have prints that are available for people that are in Baltimore. You can order them and stuff like that. I plan to put together a book which will include all the pieces from the exhibit. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about that. I may do a separate video about that. And it's good to be back on here, sharing my views with you all. And I want to thank you all again for tuning in. Um, so yeah, I'm back. I'm going to be regularly doing these videos. Yeah, so nobody's like, I see that someone said you have to remember that there's black and brown LGBTQI too. And this person goes on to say, I think in this situation, that's why race got brought up alongside LGBTQI conversation. Yeah, I mean, it's not right. I mean, I think that that's a valid point. Like, nobody's saying that all LGBTQ people are, white or anything like that. We know that there's a big, population of gay and lesbian people and transgender people in the Black community. Um, so I think that that point is well taken. And, I'm not one to ostracize anybody or anything like that. I don't have anything against, the LGBT community. Despite the issues that I pointed out dealing with, my views about transgender identity and all that kind of stuff. I still believe, I believe that people should have human rights. They shouldn't be subjected to discrimination or hatred or anything like that. Even if I disagree with certain things, I still believe that people should have civil and human rights, regardless of their sexual orientation or identity. Um, and frankly, I mean, even though I think that it's an important issue, it is an important issue. I think that we as a community have a lot of very important issues that are more important than just worrying about somebody's sexual preferences and all that kind of stuff. We had the issues of police brutality. We have the issues of race and wealth inequality in our society, massive inequality between black and white communities. We have the problem of failing schools in our community. We have the problem of community violence in our community. So we have a host of issues. We have the problem of drugs and open air drug markets and things like that, destroying the fiber of our community. We have the collapse of the nuclear family. So there are a host of very important issues that we have on our plate. So, me being concerned about somebody's personal behavior and the privacy of their home, like that's on the lowest level of my issue of priorities. And that should be on the lowest level of all of our priorities, frankly. But this is something that has been discussed, this particular stand-up routine. So I figured, that I might as well share my thoughts about this particular issue. Um, Yeah, and that's another thing. Def Rocker pointed out how the racism among the LGBT community and stuff like that, and that's something that Dave Chappelle highlighted in his routine. He talked about a gay person, having some issues with him and threatening to call the police. And we know about the whole Karen syndrome that we have in the community, where you have, people basically calling the police on black people for any little reason, basically weaponizing the police against the black community, because we know that often when you call the police, black people end up dead, or black people end up brutalized, or black people end up arrested for no just cause. So the example that Dave Chappelle pointed out was an on point example, to raise the point about how racism affects all, aspects of white society, even the so-called LGBT person that uses, a lot of the slogans from the civil rights movement, uses a lot of the the imagery of the civil rights movement to advance their interests, while sometimes these people attack the very people that they have gained inspiration from for their own movement. Um, So let's see what else people are saying. Just bear with me a second. One second, y'all. Yeah, so I don't want to keep you all too long. I want to thank you all for watching this particular live stream, and I want to thank you for your comments in the the chat room, and I'm really interested in hearing from people who are watching this on the playback as well. I want to know, what did you think about Dave Chappelle's stand-up act, The Closer? Did you think it was homophobic or transphobic? If so, why? If not, why not? So I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say. And what did you think about what I had to say about the particular stand-up routine? So with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings. And again, I'm back and I plan to post regular content on here. I'm not going to give you all dates and times and all that kind of stuff because I don't want to break my word, because my schedule is in flux and all that kind of stuff. But I'm back and I will be posting regularly. So with that, peace and blessings. Thank you for watching. Please rate, comment, subscribe. Peace.